Yes? Yes? Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here again with you today. We are doing a lot of hard work this week, and we were able to put a few photos up to see all the fun that we are having, and I really love that Shivani ma'am was able to get some photos up of us. But what I really want you to think about is just like what we thought about yesterday with the video, right? What do we see happening in these pictures? We see community, we see creative thinking, because you all came up with some innovative ways to make sure that those charts got filled out, despite my own glitches in giving you papers that were going to blow. We see joy, I hope, in the classroom, right? So we balance this with what we need to cover for materials, but it is not only it. Now, what if we had 3 times the number of people, or what if I had a room full of 100? I could still do most of the activities that I do with you all. I could still do most of them. For example, I would just need some more copies of these charts, but I can multiply that by as many as I need to. The turn and share, the think pair shares, all of those things can be done. Even with our desks being this way, we were able to turn and form groups that worked fine. So we sometimes have a block in our minds about saying, well, I don't think I could do that with more numbers, or I'm not sure I could do that with X, Y, Z. And I always ask myself, sometimes that is true. I don't mean to back us into a corner of absolutes, but I also believe that when we are creative and critical in not in a critiquing way, but in a way that holds things up, that we can find ways to engage no matter what. And we're going to continue to think about that for the next couple of days as well with the materials that we'll be presenting. I also wanted to say this. I do believe that the work we do together and the work we're doing this week and the work that I present is hard work. I think that all of us in some way or another will be working with others into our future or in our present time. And when we have to, or when we get to, think very thoughtfully and mindfully about our positionality in a classroom or in a group of people or as students or as teachers, it forces us to look at ourselves. And that can sometimes be very challenging. We must examine our own positionality when we do this work. I've been doing this work for 40 plus years. So it comes a little more easily to me, but even so, it can be hard. I am in India right now. So when we talk about culture and context and positionality, I need to always be asking myself, who am I in relation to you? Okay? So when we are in a classroom together, that's what we ask of our students, and it's what we ask of ourselves. So I don't pretend that this is easy work. I think the questions that you all asked yesterday, some of you were asking questions about what do we do with the kinds of diversity that I would be promoting, right? Clearly, I promote a sense of diversity because it is one of the ways that we can achieve equality and equity and justice in classrooms. All of the philosophies that we've been learning, all of the theories, and we're going to see more today, ask us to consider diversity in the classroom, equity in the classroom, and inclusion in the classroom. But I do not pretend that this is easy work. I don't, and I sometimes come across like I do. I sometimes say, well, just do this or just do that. Or you could do these 3 things. But I don't really believe it's that easy. What I do believe is what I said yesterday, I believe, which is this. If I try, I'm better off than I would be if I hadn't tried. Is it harder to accommodate many, many different forms of diversity in the classroom? Well, it's harder when we think about what I need to think about as a teacher, but it might be easier for me if I can open myself up to understanding what I believe, right? So what is my philosophy? So I used the examples yesterday that I hope did not offend anybody, but the examples of teaching boys versus girls, or in America, the issue of race, right? Like, we know that there are discriminatory practices towards certain marginalized groups. And we can say in a classroom setting, oh, that's terrible. I would never actually say to anybody, I hope, that I would find you so challenging to teach that I wouldn't want you in my classroom. But the reality is that there are sometimes, for example, disabilities that may be very challenging within a classroom setting because of the way the setting is set up, or because of the numbers of students in a class, or because of factors that may be beyond our control. So I always want you to know that I don't believe in black and white, either or. I always call it painting myself into a corner. You can certainly see that we all could paint ourselves into corners, which is why we do this. Okay, and again, if I can get partway there, then it's better than if I didn't look at all. All right, so I just want to say that because I do believe that this is challenging, and we're going to continue to challenge ourselves. We're going to continue to challenge ourselves today and tomorrow, and part of that challenge is not necessarily about the intellect, but about the spirit, about our philosophies, about what we believe or don't believe. And sometimes it can be very hard because it's like looking in a mirror and saying, well, I did believe this or that, or well, I have done that before. I've been there. I can speak from many years of experience, but I can tell you for sure, I could fill a class time of the mistakes I've made, or my own implicit biases that I didn't examine early on in my career. I can certainly share that. Also continuing, remember on the first day I said, I actually hope people leave with more questions than answers. And actually, I really do believe that. I find myself, when I learn, saying, what are my questions? Or what else do I still need to learn? So I'm also learning from you, and your questions have made me think. I go home, I think about the questions that were asked. I think about, did I answer that okay? Was I too this way or too that way in thinking about this question? And so you all also help me. And today we're going to think a little bit about those theories of sociocultural and critical sociocultural practices. Okay, so let's move on. Today we're going to be thinking a lot about inclusion, and also about different forms of theories of learning. So we're going to start with some of the intellectual material. And for some of you who have been in psychology, my guess is that this is not the first time you've seen this. For some of you, it might be. For some of us, it's a review. I made sure that I did a complete review of my own learning about these things. So we're going to start with the idea of behaviorism. And behaviorism is something where the key idea is that there's a change in observable behavior resulting from stimuli. So I can actually, this is based a lot in rewards or punishment, right? So when we think of people that are key in this field, we think of Pavlov. You all, what's the connection to Pavlov? Does anybody know? Yes, classical conditioning. And classical conditioning, we think of Pavlov's dogs, right? Like if you've ever had a dog, or even, so I've trained my cat at home actually using classical conditioning. So you use food as a reward, and you can teach tricks and so on. Well, we use this with children as well. We use reward, punishment, we use grades to help modify behaviors and so on. And we react, and as we grow, we learn. So this idea of classical conditioning is learning through association. We associate something with that learning. We want to get it. We want to get that piece of food, metaphorically. We want to get a good grade. And we get conditioned over years to respond in those ways. And then Skinner was operant conditioning, where we learn through reinforcements. And reinforcements, yes. Did you have a question? Oh, you did not. Do you have a comment? No? Do I have something that you need to, was there something on here? No? Okay, all right, sorry, I thought I saw your hand go up. Okay, all right. So positive and negative reinforcements, and we often say, at least I don't know if you know this expression here, but there's a very common expression, bad attention is better than no attention at all. So in raising kids or in being in classrooms, when a child is acting out, very often they're seeking that attention. And so one of our responses is to punish or to say no or to give a negative reward. But that rewards the student. So one of the things that I've said over the years, from, again, everything from first grade, I mean, my first graders were a group of, I had a very large class of really wild kids. And I would say to them, if you need my attention, can you find a better way to get it? And I used to say that to my own children as well. And so eventually my kids, my own children, as they were growing up, would learn to say, I need attention now. And I would say, thank you for using your voice to get attention, okay? Because otherwise they would act out in some ridiculous way. And I would say, that's not a great way to get my attention. There are better ways, okay? Because the fact is that bad attention is better than no attention at all. Very often, people in classrooms will act out, but it tells us something. It's not only saying, I need some attention, but it may also be telling us that they've gone into, and we're going to talk about Vygotsky in a minute, but it may also be telling us that somebody is kind of in that fight or flight zone. So all behaviors tell us something. I'm not saying to excuse all behaviors. I'm not saying all behaviors are okay to tolerate in a classroom or in life. I don't believe that. But I also believe that those behaviors tell us something. So the other thing that I've often said to kids or adults or my students is when they're in a place that feels like they're behaving in a way I don't think is appropriate, the other thing I'll say, one thing is, can you say this in a way I can hear? The other thing I'll often say is, that must feel really bad inside you right now. We don't want to do, it can't feel good that that's your choice, right? That your best choice is to act up, or your best choice is to break down, or your best choice is to yell, or your best choice is to put your head down, or your best choice is to run around the room. When those are your best choices, it's got to feel pretty bad because you have no other choices you feel you can make at that time. So when we talk about these kinds of conditionings, we can see how it happens in our world around us when we interact with other people. And here, the focus is really on observable behaviors. What do we see happening? Because we don't know what's going on in somebody's mind. We can only see what the behaviors are, okay? And then learning here is really seen through behaviorism as more of a passive process. There's a stimulus, you respond. There's a stimulus, you respond, okay? So we're going to move beyond this, and I have a chart up here that we do not need to really worry about, but here's the dog kind of getting a reward. It's hard to see a little bit. Rewards and punishment for doing something well. You feel good when you've gotten a reward for something you've done well. And then aversion therapy is intended to associate something bad with something you want to break, like let's say the habit of smoking. And so maybe you get zapped, or I don't know. But aversion theory is to try to get you to stop doing a bad behavior, right, through a negative reinforcer. So we do see this played out sometimes. That theory, we're going to keep moving beyond this, though. And some of you, again, have probably heard of Piaget. My guess is most of you have. However, and in the next slide, when we talk about, or I think it's the next one, when we talk about Vygotsky, I'm going to spend a lot more time in that spot. Because some of you may not have heard of Piaget. If I come into this classroom and assume that you have, some of you may feel a little bit lost. And when you feel lost, you may behave negatively. Now, I may not see that negative. You may just turn your brain off, or you may pull a phone out and start playing a game, or you may actually get up and leave, right? Or whatever it is that you need to do because I've kind of thrown you off a cliff, I think of it, okay? We're going to circle back around to that idea. But my point is that Piaget is a very well-known psychiatrist, psychologist, I guess you'd say, philosopher, educationist, right? And most of you have probably heard of him, but we're going to talk in a minute about the zone of learning. So Piaget's key point of learning is that learning is an internal process of organizing our information. And it's influenced by our prior knowledge and experience. We're going to start to see how these things, how these theories build. So one of my favorite things to think about is schema theory, and we're going to do a little exercise in just a moment. Piaget says this. Now remember, what we did before with conditioning was that I'm just looking at your behaviors outwardly and seeing you react to something. So Piaget is a little bit different from that. Piaget says, yes, we are reacting to things, but we're also taking it in and we're attaching it to what we know. And when we do that, we're building schema. Okay, we're building schema. So we have cognitive structures. Those are structures inside us that are building out these networks to help us make sense of the world. So we've moved a little bit beyond the idea of conditioning to now how I actually think and process and organize the world. Okay? When we train a dog, I'm not sure that they're necessarily mapping the new to the known and I'm not sure they're thinking through very on this higher level of thought. We know that humans do. Okay? Humans actually take it to that next level. So we're not just reward and punishment now, we're organizing things inside us. And Piaget identified a number of stages of development that I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about today. And unfortunately, this is a little bit blurry to see here. But these are some of the stages that, and again, if you know a little bit about Piaget, you know that, for example, sensory motor, the first thing kids do, right, is put everything, they want to taste they put everything in their mouths because it's sensory learning. And we have 5 senses, and one of our senses is taste. So it's very normal for babies and toddlers to put things into their mouths. Does anyone have any stories about anybody, a child that you know that may have put something in their mouth like in an odd or different way, or like that surprised somebody? Or have you ever felt like you really wanted to taste something even though you know maybe you shouldn't? So I live near the ocean, right? And so we have seaweed. And there's just such a temptation for me, even at my age, to want to taste the seaweed, even though I know it's going to be disgusting. Because taste is a very important part of our sensory. When I was very, very little, I have a memory of being in about kindergarten, and along a hallway in the school was a display of children's work that had been done in chalk. I have a very distinct memory of this. I was only like 5 or 6 years old. And so we were walking through the hallway, and there were these chalk drawings from children. And there was pink chalk and blue chalk, and I could not resist. I started going down the wall licking, putting my finger on and licking, because I had to taste those colored chalks, which is ridiculous because they don't taste like anything what they look like, right? The pink didn't taste any different from the blue, and it all tasted disgusting. But I have a very clear memory of one of my friends then saying, like, ew, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm tasting the chalk. So we have our sensory input, touch, and hearing and sight. So when we have students who may be down a sense in some way, like for example, my daughter who's visually impaired, she might use her other senses. It's not that she's better at her other senses, it's that she's using those senses to get a grip on the world. So she used to, when she was first learning to crawl, she would find patches of light or maybe the way the reflection is, and she'd go over and she'd put her forehead down on it. So that was a way of touching, and to touch with her forehead was very safe. When she met new people, she would grab their hands and smell them. I didn't teach her to do these things. That's sensory motor. She's just taking senses in as much as she possibly can. She's already down a sense. She's trying to figure out this world around her, and so she'd go up to total strangers and smell their hands. And I had to explain to people, that's just my daughter figuring out the world. But it's a little bit, also had to teach her, you can't go through life smelling everybody's hands. But when you're 2 and 3, people are pretty tolerant of that. And then we move through and we have propositional, so we start to say, okay, now I can talk about what this is. I start to have a concept for things. We move into being able to understand concrete and operational stages. I'm not going to get into all of these. And then formal, so this example is used with water, where I can name water, I can manipulate water, and I can think about water abstractly, right? So we move towards this higher level thinking. And it is developmental to a point. So Piaget's stages of development are very helpful for us. Now, I don't tend to be a stage person, meaning that I don't think it's necessarily, and I don't think Piaget himself would believe this, but I don't think necessarily that we're in stage this, and then we all of a sudden have entered into this, we all of a sudden are into this. I think life is a lot more complicated. I think we tend to do this, right? And we wander around and we find something new that we didn't know before, and then we get to the next thing. And that's really more about how we learn, is we are moving, but we're kind of doing it in a pretty messy way because we're humans, right? So it's helpful to know about stages, but we always have to remember that stages are what we call a construct. It's a heuristic is a word that we might say, which is a holding place in your head. So we're using a lot of constructs today to think about, and we're going to use a lot of metaphor today. It's a holding place, but it's incomplete. It's incomplete. I always want you to think about that, because I use a lot of imagery and metaphor, but you have to remember those are always limited, right? Our brains are doing amazing things, our bodies, our emotions, our souls, okay? So, but Piaget did believe very much that learning is active and developmental, and that we build knowledge through interaction with our environment. So when my daughter is putting her head down to feel a patch of sunlight, she's interacting with her environment. And that environment has provided her with that opportunity to put her head down. The more she's out and about with people, the more she learns about that world as a child. Okay, I'm gonna keep going, okay? And we're gonna do a little exercise here around schema. So I hope I can do this right, and that this will still pick up on the video. So let's see if I can get this right. So let's start by thinking about a young child learning about whales. Okay, I don't know, it's just something that maybe, let's say we're in second grade, what I would call second grade, you might call class 2, class 1, and the teacher says, I'm going to do a unit on whales, because whales are pretty incredible, aren't they? Does everybody know what a whale is? Okay, just making sure. Now notice something, if we're multilingual, one of the things I always check is that people are okay on vocabulary. That might have seemed like a silly question, but if you grew up speaking Hindi or Marathi, a whale may not be a word that enters into your everyday conversation. So I do double checks, and I do this at home. I mean, I do this anywhere I am, anytime I'm teaching, because we don't want to assume knowledge of a word that somebody may be lost in, right? So if somebody's saying, I don't know what a whale is, what does that mean? What word is that in Hindi or whatever, right? So let's start with the first thing a child is going to think of typically is what? When you say whale, what's a little kid going to say? Ocean, exactly right. So the question is, where do they live? And whoopsie, hold on. How do I, there we go. That's what I need. Thank you. So now we put in, I'm going to put water here for a reason, because now I can divide out water into ocean. And there's also fresh water, like lakes and rivers and streams. Now here's where our schema is starting to go to work. Okay, now remember, when I say schema, it's a construct. Our brains are actually doing multiple layers of this all the time. So let's take a first grader. We say whale, and they go ocean, they live in the ocean. Or they say they live in water. What kind of water? Well, now we have to think about what the ocean is. Now, this is a pretty hard concept for anybody. Okay, I know kids that are 10 years old. I have a little tiny cottage on a beautiful little lake. It's a freshwater lake. One of the first questions they ask is, are there sharks and whales in this? No, because we're not at the ocean. Well, does it have tides that go in and out? No, because we're not at the ocean. Well, now that's an odd thing to try to explain to somebody. That's water and this is water, but they're very different kinds of water. But whales don't live in lakes, they live in the ocean. So now we may have to do a whole unit on oceans. And I don't have room on here to put it in, but we might have salt water, properties of ocean water, tides. And now that's going to take us into moons and moon cycles. And oh my goodness, where do we even start? Because we started at whales. All right, so let's just not get ourselves too confusing. But my brain is going like this. Fresh water. Oh, sorry, I spelled that wrong. Lakes, rivers, streams. Now I've got a whole pile of bodies of water that go into infinite numbers of other possibilities. Okay, the other thing that's happening is I wonder what else lives in or near water. So now I'm talking about biomes and biospheres and natural kinds of, beavers live near water. And so on. Okay, what else about whales? One of the other first things that a child is going to say is that they are a kind of a fish. They are a big fish, okay? Just bear with me. Bear with me for a minute, okay? Because we're now going to say that a whale is a fish, because kids always say that. And now we say to them, well, no, actually, that's not entirely true. I can't remember why I have this arrow here, but we're going to say fish have certain characteristics. Oh, I know what I have it. So now we say to kids, well, no, fish are a little different. Fish aren't, and then we say, well, a whale is kind of like a big fish, and so we have some similarities, but we also have some differences. I'm going to see if I can find. So what is a whale? A whale is not a fish. It's a mammal. Now, if you're a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old child, what's a mammal? And also, that's a word you don't go around saying. You're not like saying to 2-year-olds, let's go be mammals today, right? You're just saying put your shoes on, right? So little kids know the word shoes, but the word mammal is a very specific kind of word. It's a very academic word. We don't go around saying, when was the last time you said mammal to anybody? Does anybody have any time that you've said mammal in the last, 6 months? I can't think of it. I never have. I just don't. So it's a very academic word. So it may not even happen until they get to school, or unless they've gone on a trip or had the experience or gone to an aquarium where I don't think they have whales, but anyway, they might learn about mammals, right? Mammals that are in the water. So a whale is a mammal. Well, now that leads us to all sorts of other things, which is that mammals have certain characteristics. And then we have to ask ourselves, what other animals are mammals? And when it really starts getting weird is when we say we're mammals and our cats and dogs are mammals, right? And things like that. So now we've got to, and I'm going to insert because one of the things that schema also does, we are building the new to the known, okay? So with our schema, we also have to learn that a fish is not a mammal, okay? So not only are we learning that a whale is a mammal and a fish is a fish, but we also have to learn that a fish is not a mammal. This gets think about what that means in our brains to be able to do this work, right? And then when we talk about characteristics, then we start to get into, and I don't remember what this box was supposed to be for. I think it's like cat, dog, and so on. So, but that comes under what other animals? So maybe specific, we might even have exceptions here, right? Platypuses, right? Platypuses are the exception to everything. Do you know what a platypus is? Okay, all right. Platypuses are weird little things, so they don't fit very comfortably, right? So that's going to bring us all. So anyway, we're not going to talk about platypuses to our second grader, okay? Because they're just going to have enough trouble wrapping their heads around the fact that a whale is not a fish, okay? But we also can keep doing lots of other things. We can do size. So we have big fish, right? So we can talk about large, and we can even do size comparisons. How big is a whale in comparison to a goldfish? How big is a whale in comparison to us? How big is a whale in comparison to an elephant? Right? So when we're talking about size, it's very hard to, unless we've seen one in real life, it's very hard for us to have some sense of what that means. This is how schema works, but remember, this is an extraordinarily simplified version because our brain is really kind of exploding, okay, all the time. And when we're working with anybody, including you right now, we're hooking into other parts of our schema. When I'm learning to eat Indian food with my hand, I'm building new to the known. What do I know about how my hand works? What do I know about the substances on my plate? I mean, you might laugh, but this was a new skill for me a handful of years ago, and I have worked on getting better and better at it, and I actually am pretty proud of myself. But here's a funny thing. Thank you. I've actually gotten very good. I can even eat rice with my hands now. Yay, go me. However, the funniest thing about that is that when I was 6 or 7, I was told, don't eat with your hands. Eat with your utensils, right? So what my schema says is eating with my hands is not good manners. But now here I am in a cultural context. So we're going to keep talking about this idea of cultural context. Context is everything, right? So we're going to keep going with this, but let's just for a minute stop and just remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about schema. We're talking about the fact that our brains are constantly doing this and that we could take on every single one of these. We can keep going. And children will, so will adults, many of us, we will also be wrong sometimes in our schema. We will come to believe something that we then have to figure out is actually not true. When I was growing up, for years and years, I always thought that cats were all female and dogs were all male. Did anybody else believe that? Because honestly, and why do we believe that? What did our schema tell us? Why would we ever believe that? Yeah, so we think of cats as being sort of feminine. They're smaller. They go meow, meow, right? And dogs are whoa, whoa, and they're bigger. I mean, for the most part. But then again, right, you can have a small dog. What's a child going to say? Oh, look at the kitty cat. No, that's a dog. No, that's a kitty cat. Why? Because it's small. Yes, but dogs have other characteristics. Now we have to start doing all of that, right? So we've mixed up. I mean, for years I thought cats were all girls and dogs were all boys. It didn't dawn on me that cats could be boys and girls and that dogs could be boys and girls. That's just a classic example that I think I'm not alone in, right? Because I can see that I'm not, in the way that my schema built out. I was building what I knew on top of, I was building what I didn't know on top of what I did know. And we often are wrong. Can anybody think of a time that you thought something that was just completely incorrect, but you really believed it? Or how about a word that sounds like another word? Can you think of anything? I'm putting you on the spot. I bet if I gave you time, you could think.
I have one. I always thought vividly would mean it's very blurry, but actually vividly means they like you remember it exactly.
Exactly, kind of the opposite. So you always thought vividly meant kind of blurry. Why do you think you thought that?
Because vaguely is also there.
Vaguely, vividly, right? Okay. So you were tying onto a schema that said vaguely sounds like vividly, right? Okay. Do you see how errors teach us? Errors are only schema that got ourselves mixed up somewhere. So that's why if I can figure out why she thinks vividly means vague, I can start to work with that, right? If I'm in a classroom setting and I say, wow, she's really not paying attention, or I can say, wait a minute, that kind of makes some sense, right? Kids make mistakes like that all the time. My kids growing up, one of my kids, I don't remember which one because there's 5 of them, one of them at some point started calling hotels hotowels. Because why? What do we, at hotels, what do you always have? Like these nice fluffy towels that are all stacked up nice and neat and warm and fluffy towels. I have no idea, but in my kid's head, we were going to a hotel because they had these great hotels. Okay, so for years, ever since, even to this day, we call hotels hotels. We're going to a hotel now. But that schema trying to do its job, that schema trying to tell us how do we, you all know the chain Pizza Hut? So one of my kids called it Pizza Hut, which makes a lot more sense when you think about it than Pizza Hut, right? These are schemas going a little wonky, but also doing some amazing work. And the beauty of the human brain is that we can do this work. That's really astounding stuff. How many of you have ever watched a young child start to learn to speak? language. Raise your hand if you've ever watched a child learn to speak. Okay. Here's what's amazing. The errors that those kids make are tied to schematic lessons. So in English, one of the very common things that kids say is, so it's your birthday today. What's your name again? Say it again. Sunat. Sonat? Sonat. Sonat. Am I close? I'm close. See, my schema does not allow for certain sounds because it's dropped some sounds. And if you study language, that's just a whole other thing. Schema works for everything, by the way. So it's your birthday today, and somebody offered you a little flower, right? Okay. Who offered you? And what is your name? Kushmira? Sushmira. Sushmira offered you a flower. Now, if you're a little child with that little flower, you say, I bringed you a flower. I bringed you a flower. That's brilliant stuff because that child never heard the word bringed. What word did they hear? They didn't hear bringed. They've never heard that word from the adults around them, but they created it all by themselves. And they created it based on what rule? What do we do with verbs? We add ed for the past tense. We add ed for the past tense. Even a little 2 or 3 or 4-year-old child will know that we add ed for a past tense. Absolutely brilliant. The next time you hear any child making any kind of a grammatical mistake, remind yourself that child's brilliant. So I bringed you a flower. And then we say, no, honey. We don't say bringed, we say brought. Well, they don't learn brought. The next thing they learn is brang. I brang you this, right? So they've learned it's not bringed, but now what are they doing? Why would they think it's brang? What are some of our sang, rang, ring, rang, sing, sang. So now they've learned a new pattern. So their schema says, I've got a new schema piece. And my new schema piece is that when we have ing, we turn it into ang. Again, they've never heard brang. They just say it. It takes a lot of years to get to brought. Okay? So we can see schema at work in almost anything. We could come up with countless examples because this is thousands of things happening all at once. Yes?
So I just want to share one experience. I mean, the small kids, those who are on feeding. I don't know how many of you have experienced that. For some reason, by default, they start, when they don't know how to pronounce the things.
Yes.
It is very small, like 1 year or 2 years or less than that even. So they call the water first is mum. Yeah.
Is mum?
Mum, yeah.
Oh.
Water we call either pani in Hindi.
Pani.
Or jal, right? But then they don't know how to pronounce and what are the meanings of these words. They don't even know the term water.
Really?
So
Okay.
Mum by default. I mean, by birth.
Really? And you all have heard this? I did not know that.
Growing up, I mean, in India, I mean, we talking about the India.
Yes, exactly.
We call the small infant, we will call mum. And the moment they start growing and learning the words water, pani, then they will start calling it when they start speaking, properly.
Yes, right.
They will start saying it pani. Mommy, I want pani.
Right.
Otherwise, till then, they always used to say mum. So
why? What's the connection?
Maybe the schema works here.
The schema.
To know the term water, the term pani.
Mum.
Otherwise, before that.
Right. There's just nothing and it's mum. Any ideas of what the connection is?
Because I have seen my nephew saying that, and
Maybe it's something connected with the mother. Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So I tried to connect that with the word mummy or mama.
Right. Exactly. That's what.
I know that because my nephew calls, they know English. I mean, my mother, my sister, and Piaget, they speak English at home. But then my nephew, he calls his mummy, my sister, Maji, Ma.
Okay.
He doesn't call mummy.
So it's just.
Learned, but they still say.
Right. Yes.
My daughter has started using Hindi words in English.
Yes.
Especially, and when I tell her I don't speak completely English,
Oh.
she says I like to do that.
Oh.
I cannot add that.
So she's doing it intentionally.
Put a verb of Hindi.
Yes.
Mama, I'm
Yep.
drawing this. So she's too much into crafts. So I tell her that can you just break it properly?
Yeah. So that's an intentional breaking, right? So actually riddles and jokes are very often based on on an intentional disruption in a way, right, of schema. So it surprises us because there's a jolt there. So we could spend a lot of time talking about schema. It's really fascinating stuff, and it's hilarious to watch when kids are starting to do some of this. But even in classrooms, when somebody makes a mistake, I say, I know why you made that mistake. If I don't know, I can ask, what is it? What's your connection? So the idea of vividly with vaguely is like, that's something that's really interesting, isn't it? We're thinking about the way a word gets formed. Okay, so let's keep going here. And I think about schema. You've probably seen this slide before, but I think about schema. These are my own images. These are my own metaphors. These are not anything I borrowed from anybody. It's just me. I think of schema in two different metaphors. The first is a coat hook. And the coat hook is that we have to attach our knowledge to something we already know. So think about let's pretend that I have a little coat hook. You know what a coat hook, right? A hanger for something. Let's say that I have a coat hook right here. Just pretend that I have a coat hook right here, okay? Now, you come into the room and you have a coat on, or I hand you a coat, and you say, okay, and you go to hang it up. And if there's a coat hook there, it stays. But if there's no coat hook there, it drops on the floor. And now I say to you, pick it up and try again. You pick it up and try again. It still falls down. Pick it up, try again. It still falls down. It will keep falling down indefinitely until we get a coat hook. There are times that we punish a child, or punish, that's a tough term, but maybe a poor grade. Maybe we think they're not appropriate for some other class. Maybe we say they're not appropriate for our class. But what we forgot to do was give them a coat hook. You can tell a child till the cows come home, do this math sheet. You're not going out to recess till you do it. You're not going to pass this class until you do it. You're just asking them to keep putting a coat up with no coat hook. So instead, we say, what do you need for the coat hook to make this go? Maybe what you need is a different math sheet. Maybe what you need is some review of some basic math facts. Maybe what you need is something different from me just yelling at you to get the coat hung up. And eventually you're going to get really frustrated and you're going to break down, you're going to cry, and you're going to say, I'm out of here. The coat will never hang up. And that's when we say things like, I can never do X, Y, Z. I'm terrible at math. I will never do math. You know why we say that? Because we didn't have a coat hook somewhere, okay? So coat hooks mean that we build on prior knowledge. Now, I've also heard people say, well, they don't have any prior knowledge. That's not true. Everyone always has prior knowledge. Babies have prior knowledge, okay? For a child to say that a whale is a fish, they have prior knowledge. Somewhere they learned about fish, okay? We always have prior knowledge. It's almost impossible to tell me a situation where somebody does not have something you can hook onto. And what I tell I have people that are training to be teachers, and what I tell them is when you're working with students, they say, but I tried breaking it. Let's say they're trying to write a paragraph, okay? Well, I told them to write a sentence. Well, that didn't work. Okay, well, tell them to write a word. Well, that didn't work. Okay, then have them say it, and you write it down. Okay, well, they can do that. There is always a place to put a coat hook in. I tell you, don't paint yourself into corners. There's no such thing as either or. I suppose you could argue the point and try to think of a time. But if you were to give me an example from most classrooms, I will tell you there's a place you can keep backing it out to. You have somebody who doesn't speak the language, then find a different connection. Find a picture. Find something that you can hook it onto. How many of you in memorizing something referred to mnemonic devices? Every good boy deserves fudge is one that's for music. The planets all lined up. How many of you have an example of a mnemonic device that you use? You know what I mean by that? What's a tool, a trick? Can anybody think of one? What is it? For the rainbow. Okay, so we always learned that as Roy G. Biv. Red, orange, yellow. V, B, G, green. And you do it in the other. What did you learn it as? Vibgioy? Oh, Vibgioy. It's flipped. Oh, that's hilarious. We always have learned it as Roy G. Biv. But there's a perfect example, okay? What we're doing is we just built a coat hook. That's what we did. If I can remember Roy G. Biv and you can remember it backwards, we've just built a coat hook. Now when you go to take your test on rainbow colors, you know. And when you study color theory later on, or you're doing art later on, you remember it. Okay, and you know all of a sudden you can start to learn what complementary colors are and so on and so forth. But you started with a coat hook. Okay, all right. So that's what we always do. So we always need a coat hook for the new to stick. And if you see a child or an adult or anybody in your life that's just putting that coat up there and it keeps falling down, stop yelling at it, at the kid. Stop grading them badly. Instead say, let's build a coat hook, all right? So that, and trust me, it really does work. The other metaphor I use is popcorn. And if you think of that schema that we just showed, okay, I think of popcorn only, this is a very imperfect image, but it still works for me. I think of like those neural connections that are happening as popcorn that's popping. And here's the thing about this metaphor is that you have to pretend that the lid is off, and every time a kernel hits a pile, it sets off that next kernel. And then those kernels are setting off that next kernel. And over here, I've got a pop that happened, but that pop has just set off those pops and these pops. So I think a schema, like a whole bunch of popcorn popping, and it's hitting all the other popcorn kernels, okay? Which means that if I only have a few kernels to start with, the popping isn't very much. But the more I have, the more it pops. Do you understand that? When we talk about whales, the more experiences kids have, the more books they're reading, even if they are pretend books, even if they are impossible books. How many of you know the story Brown Bear, What Do You See? Does anybody know that book? Well, in that, it's a very easy children's book. I do it a lot with kids in India because it doesn't demand a lot for language. But there's a purple cat in there. All the other animals have colors, red bird, yellow duck, and then you get to purple cat. So the question there is, have you ever seen a purple cat? And kids go, no. Right, it's crazy, right? So because we read that book, I now can talk about cat colors. And I can say, what cats have you seen? What color cats do you think there are? We can do all of this stuff. The more kernels we have, the more our schema pops. So when you're talking about kids from circumstances where they don't have exposure to as many opportunities, or they don't have as many books to read, or they don't have as many trips they take, you're talking about kids who may need to have that schema activated in new and different ways. And that's one of the things we can do in schools. We can show pictures. We can do all sorts of things to help pop that schema, okay? And the more we do of that, I'm a big believer in doing it through books, okay, book reading. All right, so let's keep going to one of the most important topics that I can think of in my life, which is Vygotsky. I am a huge Vygotskyan groupie, okay? This was a theory that kind of changed my entire life. Hi, welcome, thank you for being here. So this idea of Vygotsky, we're going to talk about Vygotsky for a moment. Vygotsky was a Russian theorist, educationist from the early to mid 1900s. He died quite young, and which is a shame because we always wonder what might he have added else to the world. But Vygotsky was building on other people's theories, and Vygotsky said, well, okay, I see that learning happens in the environment. I see that people are activating schema. All of that continues to make sense. But Vygotsky said, wait a minute. Everything that we learn is learned in a context. There's that word again. You're going to keep hearing it. Everything we learn is socially mediated. How is it socially mediated? Right now, I am socially mediating your learning. We learn in relation to others, and in particular, we learn from people who have more knowledge. Now, that might be a teacher, a mentor, a coach, a parent, an older sibling. It could even be somebody younger than us who's teaching us something because they have more knowledge. So all learning, arguably all learning, according to Vygotsky, happens through socially mediated experiences in relationship with a more knowledgeable other. Okay. Let's think about what that really means. What that means is that, so we're going to do another little exercise here, and I'm keeping my eye on the time. We've got time. We're okay. I want you all to hold your hands up just like this for me. Go ahead, everybody do this, please. I want to see everybody's hands up. Right here, keep your hands right up, okay? Right here, between my two hands, is what Vygotsky calls the zone of proximal development. You can keep your hands up, and I want you to go ahead and say that. Zone of proximal development. I want you to say it again. Zone of proximal, that means near or close or proximate development. Zone of proximal development. Now I want you to look at your lower hand. Everything below that hand is what you already know. So if we use it in terms of something like, let's say, getting dressed. You know how to put on your shoes. You know how to zip up a coat. You know how to button. You know how to pick clothes in the morning or whatever it is. You know a lot about getting dressed. When I first came to India, I had no idea how to wear a sari. Okay, so that was not in the zone I already knew. But now look at your upper hand up here. Up above here is what you can't yet know. And I'm saying yet, but it's the stuff that we do not yet have access to knowledge about. So if I were to ask you all right now to continue taking your notes for this class in Russian, is there anybody in this class that could do that? What if I insisted? What if I told you your test is going to be in Russian? Will that make you learn Russian? No, it will not. Will you, what, up here then, is that what you cannot yet access, and it's an impossible thing to ask. All right, you can put your hands down. What happens in this zone up here is what we might call fight, flight, freeze, right? I have another better slide, really, that talks about this. So I'm going to move to this one. These are the tasks the learner can do without assistance. Now, that can be for anything. It might be math. It might be adding 1 + 1. It might be getting dressed in the morning. It might be cooking. It's anything, anything. Academic. It's even true of emotions, but we won't get into that today. These are the tasks that a learner can do with assistance. That's what schooling and learning is all about. And these are the tasks that a learner cannot do even with assistance yet. Yet. There's always a yet. You could study Russian for the next 4 years and come back and take that test in Russian. Maybe. I don't know. But anyway, maybe, right? I was in a zone of fight or flight when it came to wearing a sari. In fact, one of the first events when I was in Delhi in 2016 was going to a friend's wedding. And everybody told me, just go get yourself a sari. Well, that's just so easy to say. And I'm old enough that I should know how to do that. I was with my two daughters who were 15 and 17 at the time, and I kid you not, I said to them, let's go see if I can find a sari. And I'm a big believer in I can do this. I have self-efficacy. I can figure this out. I go down to the sari shop, and I go in, and I realize that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know what parts go with a sari. I don't know how to figure out what those parts are. I'm starting to feel myself, I could feel it in my body starting to get very anxious. This wedding is like 3 days away, and I'm just going, there is no way I can do this. And I walked out of that shop, and I turned to my daughters, and I said, I'm outside my zone of proximal development. And my kids are like, Mom, we have no idea what you're talking about. I said, I just hit fight or flight. I'm out. And the next day, I said to one of my colleagues, I can't get a sari without help. I need help. I need assistance. I do not know how to do this. And they said, well, just go down and get it. I said, no, you don't. You're not hearing me. I'm asking for assistance. So they did, and all of a sudden I realized, gee, I not only need the sari, I need the thing called the fall, and I need a skirt underneath, and I need a blouse, and I suddenly realized, like, I could never have done that by myself. But then it came time to wear a sari, and I hired one of the people that was one of the household helps. I said, please come tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. get me dressed, okay? I have been a very competent dresser all of my life. I mean, I can get myself dressed, right? Couldn't do it. So, but now I sort of can. And now if I were told I had to go get a sari all by myself, I probably could manage it. So when I say yet, it's because our ZPDs keep changing and changing and changing. Every time we learn something, we get higher in our ZPD. This particular, so the fight or flight zone is what we hit when we're here, and our comfort zone is here. Now we talk about wanting safe classrooms. Do we want a classroom where everyone hangs out here? No, we do not want that. Why? Why don't we want that? What is that? Why don't we want people hanging out right here in the comfort zone? No growth. You do not get growth and you do not get learning. All learning only happens in the ZPD. I'm a very big believer in this. Remember I said everything connects to schema? Everything connects to the ZPD. You do not get learning or growth. Now, that's fine to be comfortable. We could all sit here and play child's games and we'd all have a great time, but we wouldn't learn. And that's fine. It's okay to not learn all the time. You can go read a silly, fun book and not learn. But if we want learning to happen and we believe that classrooms are about learning. Now, I also don't want to throw you off that cliff, okay? So what does it look like if we're hanging out here and a student is bored? What does boredom look like in a classroom? Give me some examples. What does boredom look like? Non-attention. No participation. Low participation. What else does boredom look like? Say that again.
No energy.
No energy. Sleeping, putting your head down and going to sleep, right? Talkative, distracting. Now let's talk about what fight or flight looks like. If you are way beyond and you just are not going to, you just keep putting that coat up and it's nothing there, what does fight or flight look like in a classroom? Maybe. Yes. Right? They don't know where to focus, so it may look like distraction. What else might somebody do in fight or flight? Shut down. They might get angry. They might get angry. They might get anxious. They might shut down. They might actually put their head down and sleep. Some of the behaviors look a lot like boredom, but they're shut down instead. When we fight, we're yelling at. So I've had students at earlier ages. I think one of you were using the example of middle schoolers, right? Being very, I don't want to do this. Well, then ask yourself, have I asked them to do something that's outside their ZPD? If I haven't, if I think it's within it, then I say to students, you can do this because I've planned this very carefully to be within your zone of learning. I actually use those. I don't use zone of proximal development, but I say your zone of learning. And if you think you can't, then we need to back it out a little bit, but I think probably you can. Or maybe I really have thrown somebody off the top and I say, I didn't realize that this is more than you can do right now, okay? Fighting can look a lot like anger. It can look a lot like misbehavior. It can look a lot like all sorts of things. Fleeing can look like somebody leaving the room. Just leave the room. I told you I've had students that were very at risk who used to say to me, why don't you kick me out of the room? That's a begging for a flee, right? It's like, just let me go. And I say, how about if we come back and figure out where we lost our way? Which would make a lot more sense than telling you to leave. Because if you leave, you don't learn, okay? So this concept, I've used it as a parent. I've used it for myself. Like I said, the sorry example, I walked out and I said, I'm beyond my ZPD. And my kids are like, we have no idea what you're talking about. But that's what I was referring to. And then we also scaffold. And we scaffold instruction by saying, where do I back it out until I find that coat hook? All of these images are just images I use in my own mind to remind myself, when I see a behavior, it's telling me something. Now, it could also be emotional. You might know very well what you're doing and still be bored, or you might feel like you can't do something when you really can. So there's an emotional layer to that as well. But we're going to stop there for now with that. And then we're just going to quickly, I know I've got to wrap up here. I'm going to quickly say this. We can come back around to this in the next session as well. Critical sociocultural theory is very similar. It's still based in sociocultural, our social and cultural connections, But remember, critical, we're putting the critical lens on it. And the big thing to know here is that we are really looking at how learning is influenced by our social, cultural, historical, political, religious contexts, with a focus on power dynamics, identity, and social justice. And I'm going to have an exercise for you to do later, and we're going to be talking about how we use critical theory to now ask those questions. Whose voices are heard and whose are not? Where do I stand in relation to you? All of that is critical theory. Everything we've been talking about is really about critical sociocultural theory, okay? It's asking those questions. So we're going to close the session out there. But I don't want to use up the break. They need a little bit of a break. Yeah, so can we break it now and we'll get a break? We can still take a... Okay, all right, that's fine. So you are going to get a break. Let's just wrap up this slide then here, and we'll think about what this is. And then I have an exercise for you in a little bit that's going to be that take-home exercise that you're going to come back with tomorrow, and we can start thinking about it today. So what do we say about critical sociocultural theory? So we remember what Vygotsky told us. What was that thing called again? What's the ZPD? Say it one more time. Very good. Okay. So the other thing that I believe in is the more somebody says it with their own mouth, the more they're going to absorb it into your... It's one thing to write it down. It's one thing to hear me say it. But teaching it doesn't mean you're learning it. Teaching does not mean learning. And when we talk about student-centered learning, when we're talking about all these pedagogies this week, when we talk about all these theories, the bottom line is just because it's taught does not mean it's learned. What I want is learning. So the more you say that, the more I know you're learning it. The more your brain and your body and your mouth is engaged in learning it. I also check around the room and make sure that everybody actually is saying it. I don't care if you say it slightly wrong or whatever, because that choral recitation, I'm not picking on anybody, right? But I'm making sure that nobody's dropping off the sides. I'm trying to build a coat hook that you know is safe for you and okay for you. Safety within a classroom means safe risk, right? Because you don't have the growth and the learning without mistakes. You don't have growth and learning without that movement. So critical, we take it one step further. And now, so what we've done beyond Vygotsky is to say, okay, Vygotsky's great and everything, but one thing Vygotsky didn't account for is, where's the power in the classroom? Where's the power in the curriculum? Who are we teaching? How are we teaching it? What is our philosophy? And that runs us all the way back to day one, when we thought about our philosophies in the classroom and why we believe those things, okay? And how we believe them as well. We are also a product of our social existence. We are a product of our culture. We are a product of our historical contexts. We are a product of our religious and faith-based contexts. We are a product of our economic contexts. So when we think about this, it's more than just social, cultural, historical. I always make sure to add religious, political, economic. Those are the other three I usually add. And we could probably add more. You can probably think of other ways in which we're building this context around us. And I like to use the example of a river, okay? Now, this is gonna tie into an exercise I'm gonna have you do in a little bit. But I think of the image of the river, and this is my, again, this is my thing. This is not something, oh, that's our break. Oh yeah, right, I have it over here. Hold on just a second. Here, okay. This is from a chapter that I wrote in a book, and the chapter is called Rivers and Fireworks. Fireworks kind of being like the popcorn image. Let's start, we are all in a river. We are all in a river. This is the teacher, and we're in a river that we're either born or adopted into or we move into. I am now in an Indian river. We're in multiple rivers. Remember, these are all incomplete images. But I'm now in an Indian river, so I have to learn and do some things that are very Indian in context that I don't do every day. If you came to visit me, you'd feel the same. There'd be things you might not know, foods you might not understand, dress you might not know, context, okay? I mean, I told you I come from snow. You might not have been accustomed to knowing how to dress for snow, right? With boots and coats and all that. Okay, but I teach what I know and I teach how I know to teach it. But what I know is what I've experienced and what I also have learned in my own growing up. It's also how I was taught, okay? So I am who I am. I am situated in my river of all those things that happen, my social, my context, my everything that I believe, okay? So I teach what and how I know. I know what and how I have experienced things, and I experience what our culture conveys as valuable. And then it's just, this is me, or a teacher, but me in this case, okay? Now, my river is all of the things that I've had access to, or that I've lived in, or that I can think about. And these riverbanks are the norms that get set by society. So, for example, part of my river might be, for example, getting my PhD. That's a very unique thing in my river. A lot of people may not have that. But I was able to grab that because of what? Because I had other schooling in my river. So think of me floating along my river and I grab a hold of this. Oh, books when I was little. Oh, experiences when I was little. Oh, a mom who's a teacher. That helped me a lot. But also my negative experiences might have formed some of that. Maybe my negative experiences made me stronger. Maybe they made me more resilient. Maybe I didn't have access to some things and I learned the value of money, right? Or whatever it is. So it's not necessarily that I have everything because I didn't grow up having everything. What I know is I had my river, and my river led me to being able to grab a hold of a few things. I had a certain faith. I had a certain this, a certain that. I had 3 siblings. That's part of my river. Everything I've lived in is part of my river. And that formed me. And those experiences now have allowed me to be this person to teach. But let's complicate that a little bit, and then this will be the last slide before break. Let's add this, which is multi-directional. I've only added this to my river. So in addition to me floating down this river and picking up things or whatever that's influencing me, I am also influencing the river because I also get to kind of throw some things out. Or I get to say, I kind of want to push against this riverbank a little bit, right? I had to learn about non-binary language, which was not a thing. Well, it probably was, but I didn't know that as a child. So I can either just pick up what I know and go along, or I can also have influence on that river a little bit. And I can push against the banks a little bit. What do we do when we're in a river, like think metaphorically? One thing I can do is float along. Ah, this is so great. I'm just going to take whatever comes along. It's just the floatiest river in the world, and I'm just fine. But sometimes we're not fine in that river. Sometimes that river is going to drown us. And when we're going to feel like we're drowning, we have to fight to keep afloat. We might find others that have similar rafts around us. We are stronger if we tie all our rafts together. That's how we start to change and push against some of the norms if we feel that we need to. And I'm not saying those norms are going to change. I'm saying these are ways we could. We can swim against the current. We can say, this current isn't working very well for me, to be honest. We could say, you know what, I actually think I want to jump rivers. Well, it's not impossible to jump rivers. You can actually put yourself into a context if you have the opportunity, right, to be able to do that. So we are influencing the river, and the river is influencing us. And now it gets even more complicated with one last image, which is that the students are also coming in with rivers. All of you also have your rivers that you've lived in, and we're all interacting, and it gets it's like schema. All of a sudden it becomes very complicated. So not only are these my teacher beliefs, values, and social reproduction, but in addition, I am also impacting my students' rivers, and they are influencing mine, okay? And these really all overflow and intersect, and they may even be, all of these are possibilities here. But if a student's river is far outside my experience, that's where I start to have conflict and I don't understand. So when we talk about things like inclusive practices for disability, well, I don't know what it means to be blind, so I don't think I can teach that. Or maybe I just need to figure out a different way to be and to understand that river. I can either say I can't teach that, or I can say maybe this is a product of who I am and I can keep learning, all right? This river metaphor works for me. It's not a perfect metaphor, but it works pretty well for me to understand the interactions between teaching and learning, because every single one of us is in not just one river, but multiple. We have families. We have people that we have connections to. What resources do you have? Not just economic, what social resources, what capital, cultural resources do you have? Okay, all of that forms our river. Okay, and I know we need to wrap up, but we're going to end with that metaphor. Hopefully I didn't throw too much at you, but I'm going to have you do an exercise just to think about where you are going to draw your own rivers. And you're going to hand that in tomorrow, and you can do anything you want to draw your rivers. What river are you living in? And it's not your life journey. It's not a timeline per se. It's what you think is in your river that makes you who you are. That makes you who you are. And you can choose any way to do that you want to. It might be with words. It might be with images. It might be with colors. It might be with a river that bends. It may be with a river that's straight. You decide. Okay, and that'll be your exercise for tonight. So let's go back to our lessons, and we have a 15-minute break. All right, there we go. Thank you. Okay, welcome back from break, everybody. I hope we all are refreshed. We got our energies going. So I'm going to do a couple of activities with you during this time period. And let me just check one other. Oh yeah, we're not doing this is fine. So we have some time ahead of us to think about a number of the concepts that we learned earlier, but I also want to do an activity with you. I call it the barcode activity. Let me grab my... And I want you to have a piece of paper out and a pen, like have your notes ready. I'm not collecting this, but I want you to be able to take some notes. So I'm going to pretend, I'm holding onto my phone because I'm going to pretend that I have a special app on my phone. And my app is a little barcode app. Okay? Now we're going to imagine that you all are my students at any level, in any classroom, anywhere, of any size. And right now, before I get into my barcode app, I would like you all on your piece of papers to write down one thing that you feel sometimes makes you feel a little different from the norm. Now, you don't ever have to share these with anybody. You may, if you choose, we can do some sharing. You are never obligated to share anything. If you're not even comfortable writing it down, you can think of it in your head. But if you write it down, we can remember it and talk about it a little bit. One thing that makes you different sometimes from somebody else, and this could be anything, and it could be good or bad or in between or nothing. For example, the fact that I've adopted some children might make me, it doesn't mean nobody ever has, it just means it's a little different from the normal everyday. It might be that I am different from you all because I'm American and you're Indian. So I can think of lots of things for myself, right? Just something that you feel makes you different. It might be an identity thing. It might be something you do or a hobby. It might be something that you struggle with. It could be anything at all. So just sit for a minute and think about something that you feel sometimes makes you feel a little different from the norm. What might make you feel sometimes that you're a little bit different from others that are around you? Just take a minute. Just take a moment. It could be a unique skill. It could be a birthmark you have. It could be a challenge you face. It could be anything at all. Okay, did everybody think, raise your hand if you thought of something. Raise your hand if you did not think of anything. Okay, now we're going to go on to the next one. The next one is, think of something that is a strength or a gift or a talent that you have. Something that you either do well or that is part of you, that is a strength, a talent, a gift, a positive something. It could be a trait, it could be an action, it could be something, a skill, a knowledge base. What is something that is a strength that you have? Jot it down if you can think of something that's a strength or a gift or a talent. Raise your hand if you thought of something that you have that's a strength or a gift or a talent. Is there anybody who did you not think of one? Okay, I want you to phone a friend there. See if somebody knows of something that you do that you are, or that you're. What could you tell her that she has for a strength for herself? a very
clandestinely,
existed
energy about her.
energy.
That,
So, a clandestine energy about
it's
you.
like something that, she has a very commanding presence.
A commanding presence. So she has a strong presence.
She does.
Is that something you agree with?
Maybe.
Okay. You agree with it enough that you could write it down?
I might think of something.
Okay, go ahead and think of something. Think of a strength or a gift or a talent. What do you think you do well? Anything at all? Is there anybody else who couldn't think of a positive for themselves? All right, we got something written down there. And now the last thing, I want you to think of something that is a challenge or a struggle or a deficit or something that you find very challenging for yourself. And again, it could be something that you do or that you are or that you have. It could be anything. And it may even repeat from something else that you've written down. But try to think of something that is a challenge or a difficulty that you face or that you have. Did you all think of something that's a challenge or a struggle or a difficulty? Is there anybody who could not think of one? Did you have an easier time thinking of a difficulty than a strength? I'm just curious. Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Okay. All right, now it's time for me to get my barcode machine out, okay? Now you all are my students, and every single one of you thought of something that makes you feel a little different from the norm. You all thought of a challenge, and you all thought of a strength that you have, okay? I have no idea what those things are, but I am now going to, boop, 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 boop. I'm now going to set my little barcode app. And now I'm going to walk around the room, and I've set it. I can set it for anything I want to set it for. And right now I'm setting it for the thing that makes you feel a little different. Just that. I've just got it set. Boop, 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 just for that. And now I'm going to come through and I'm going to scan you as a barcode. I'm being filmed over there. Okay? Got it right there. We make sure everybody's included. All right. Now on my little app, I can see everybody's thing that makes them feel different. And that's all I have for information, is the only thing that makes. Now I would like some of you to be sharing out, and it's okay if you do not want to share out. Can somebody share something that makes you feel different from the norm sometimes? Again, it could be anything, good, bad, or in between. Anybody want to share what you wrote down or thought about? Yeah.
I don't give up.
You don't give up. And that sometimes is different from people around you. So that makes you kind of a unique person in the fact. So that's what my barcode says. You don't give up. Who else has something that makes them feel different from the norm sometimes? Yes.
I think my ability to manage my negative emotions very well than people around me.
You can manage your negative emotions quite well, and sometimes better than other people that are around you. Yep, good. That's on my list. What else?
I have a nature of helping everybody, no matter if they are my enemies or they don't like me, but I still go forward.
Yep.
And they are in the need of help.
And so you are an Uber helper. All right. And so that can be both good and bad, but we've got that right here on our list. Who else has something that makes you feel different sometimes?
I have a dark pink mole on my right leg.
You have a mole, did you say? A dark?
Pink mole.
A dark pink mole on your leg. Oh, yep, that's for sure. She sure does. It's barcoded in, okay? Do you hide that mole sometimes, or it gets hidden anyway? Yep. Do you ever worry if it's showing? No, it doesn't bother you. It's fine. Okay, all right. Anybody else want to share one? Yes.
I'm learning 2 foreign languages,
You're learning 2 foreign languages. What are they?
Spanish and Korean.
Very nice. Spanish and Korean? Those are very different languages. That makes you very unique for sure. Yes, excellent. What else? I saw a hand up over here. Yes.
I have a birthmark shaped like a map.
Shaped like a map. A map of what? Do you know? Oh, state. That's really wonderful. So you have a very unique birthmark. That does make you unique for sure. Did you have your hand up? You have multiple tattoos. That does probably make you unique. And back home, you'd be right in with the crowd. Everyone. In fact, everybody's saying, why don't I get one? I've got to think about that. Yeah, that's a good one. Jim, tell me your favorite. Okay, okay. You're not sure which one? Okay. Can you describe one of them to me? Okay, that's good. What is that? What is that of? The puppy. Very nice. Okay, a tattoo of a puppy. Love it. All right. So we all have something that makes us feel different. And sometimes those things that make us feel different can make us feel very self-conscious, but sometimes they don't. So a mole might make us feel self-conscious, or being overly helpful where maybe that's, or maybe learning 2 languages makes us feel proud. Or maybe it's not something we want to brag about because we know that everybody's going to think we're bragging, right? Or so whatever it is that makes us feel different, I've got this whole list in front of me, and that's the only thing I set my barcode for, okay? And now I'm going to reset my barcode, and we're going to pretend that you're any class of students. You could be grade 3, it could be 10th grade, it could be college, and you're coming in the door, and at the beginning of the day, now I have to reset. Boop, 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 boop. Now I've reset, and this time the only thing I'm looking at are your strengths, the good, positive, the thing that you think is just a very good strength and ability that you have. So boop, boop, boop. And as you come in through the door, I kind of just go boop, 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 boop. Okay? And what do we share out for that? What are some of the things that you have for strengths? Can you people share some of your strengths? These should be fun that you could share, right? Yeah.
I dance.
You dance. Yay. I can't dance. I trip over my own shadow. So that is a really great skill to have. What else? Yes.
I can listen to others, like whatever they have to say. I can listen to them
for hours. You're a good listener. That is a great skill. And sure enough, beep, 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 good listener. That is fantastic. Good listener, good dancer. What else?
I quickly believe others.
You believe others? Is that what you said?
Very quickly.
Very quickly believe others. So you are trustful. You are trustful. And you believe that others are trustworthy. So that's a great thing. You have a very positive energy towards believing others. Beep, boop.
I trust my potentials, very much.
I
trust my potentials.
You,
I can do
you trust your own potential. You have that feeling of self-confidence, self-efficacy, and you trust your potential. That is fantastic. Who else has something positive to share?
Being empathetic, and I also think I'm adaptable. I quickly adapt things around.
Yeah, and what was the first one you said?
Empathetic.
Empathetic. Okay, sorry. Sometimes I say so. Empathetic, and you can adapt very well to things around you. So very adaptable. Yes, that's excellent on my list.
I like to see only the positives in a situation of people. I look at the positives.
See the positives. So now I've got this class, and all I set it for was this. Now you all come into my classroom. I cannot tell you how excited I am. I have got the best class anywhere. Look at this. I've got a dancer. I've got someone who's empathetic. I've got somebody who is very flexible. I've got somebody who can listen. I am so glad to have a listener in my classroom. So I see this positive, and what I see in every single one of you is that, oh my gosh, my barcode machine I hit the jackpot. I have got the best group that ever existed. I can't even believe I have such talent in this room. Okay, ready? One last time. Boop, 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 boop. Now I'm setting it to be the challenge or the difficulty or the struggle that you have, okay? And now again, you're coming into my classroom. I don't know you. And again, I go around, beep, boop, beep, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep. And this time, it's your challenges or your struggles. Who'd like to share something out? Yes?
Mingling in a crowd or a group.
You?
Mingling.
Mingling. It's very hard to mingle in a crowd or a group. Oh, you would think I would be fine with that. But I also know that's a tough one. So a hard time to kind of get to know and mingle in a group.
So me as a teacher, I'm facing this challenge right now that I'm not that harsh to students. Like it's really hard for me to criticize their work.
Yes.
Giving them redos.
Right?
I can do to a point, but then they're puppy face and I'm like.
Yes, okay. So you feel like maybe your empathy and responsiveness could backfire on you. So maybe you need to toughen up a little. But I don't know if that's necessarily, it could be a weakness and a strength. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Other challenges or struggles. Social interaction. So again, kind of that sense of maybe not feeling that you can always just fit in easily. Yeah. What else? Difficulty initiating conversations. Oh, this group is a really shy, quiet group that's having trouble with social interactions. Wow, that's a bummer because I had a lot planned. Yep. Can be condescending sometimes. I do not want that person in my class. Wowee. Last thing I need. What else? I see a hand up over here.
I do not have a filter. Like when I speak, I don't think.
No filter. Wow, she just says whatever she thinks. Oh, that's going to be a problem. Because I don't want to hear all those thoughts. Okay, what else?
I'm not good at technicalities, which has a lot of numerical steps. I start losing track.
Losing track of numerical steps. There's too much to keep in mind and too much. Oh, wow, that's going to be a problem. Because I don't know, I have some exercises that's going to be a big problem for. So now I'm looking at this. This is just terrible. I'm going to have to talk to my colleagues about this now. I think I picked the wrong profession. This is really terrible. I've got this group that's just a mess. They're just a mess. They just don't, oh boy. How am I ever going to bring this group together? What am I going to do? Well, I don't know. I'm going to have to just do what I can. So here's the thing about that. Now I'm going to reset, boop, 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 and this time it gets everything. I've collected all of those things from everybody. And that means that I've got a very complex set of human beings in front of me. Now, here's the thing that I want to note, and I'm going to put up another slide that I'm going to work on kind of with you, and we'll see how that goes. But here's the bottom line. Every single one of you in this room, and I've done this exercise dozens of times over many years. And every time I've done this exercise, every person in the room, whether there's 200 or 10, have been able to think of something good, a strength, something challenging, that's a challenge, and something that makes them feel different from the norm. Now, in the case that there was somebody who felt they couldn't think of a good thing, it's harder sometimes to think of a good thing than a negative thing for lots of reasons. But notice that I kept working with it, right? And one of the things I said was, could you ask a friend about that thing, right? So I'm using a strategy that says, I believe that this person has many, many strengths that she might be able to develop and think of on her own, but she might also need some support, some scaffolded supports to think of, okay? Interestingly, we usually don't have much trouble coming up with something we feel that we have as a challenge or a difficulty or a disability or whatever. I will tell you, I can think of a lot. In India, I fall a lot, and I think it's because I'm not used to walking on uneven surfaces. And I have scars on my knees. And so I feel actually feel a little bit disabled. Between that and my eyes, I feel like, why can I not walk, right? Like, isn't that kind of a basic skill? And the other one is I'm very directionally challenged. My kids tease me all the time. Even my blind daughter is more directional than I am, okay? And so she's always saying, Mom, you really shouldn't be depending on a blind kid for your directions places. And I always say, you know more than I do, you know? I remember the time she said, I got lost in this mall where I was driving, and I said, I don't know how to get out of here. And she said, go down. And I literally said to her, I don't understand what you're saying. What is down? And she said, Mom, you know the word down. It means go that way. And she said, I'm blind and I know what down is. So I was so nervous about getting my way out of there that I couldn't even hear. You know, it was like, what's down? I don't know, what's down? And then I said, how do I know which direction is down? Just look at the road. The one that goes down is where we want to go. That's how directionally challenged I am. And I do feel it. I feel it I laugh, but I also have been very frustrated with that before. I get very worried about getting lost. Thank goodness for technology that helps me a lot with that. But so we all have challenges, okay? We all have gifts and we all have things that make us feel different. And sometimes those things that make us feel different make us feel special different. But sometimes those things that make us feel different make us feel a little worried different, okay? Sometimes what makes us feel different could be something that other people are going to judge or look at or make us feel a little weird about, okay? Sometimes they're going to ask us a question that doesn't settle with us well. Sometimes it's something that we feel very proud of, but we also don't want to necessarily be brought out as targeted for that in some way, right? So we have to be careful even about the things we feel particularly proud of or glad about, okay? So the point that I'm making is this: it doesn't matter who we are as human beings, because we are human, we have all of those things in us all the time. So when we are in the education field, what we need to understand is that we have a barcode machine, metaphorically. Remember, I told you I'm using a lot of metaphors today. Our barcode machine doesn't always let us know everything for every student, but we can get to know that over time. We can do exercises like the one I just did, but there are many, many exercises we can do to get to know people. The bottom line is this: there's nobody that is going to be enough. Very rarely, I would say, again, absolutes we have to be careful of. Very rarely are we going to have somebody who won't sometimes feel a little different. Very rarely. I mean, I feel different a lot in India. Am I dressed okay? Do I know how to, the sari thing, has thrown me. Eating with my hands. I think, are people looking at me? Are people watching me? Are people judging whether I'm doing this right or not? Am I taking too much? Am I taking too little? Am I making more of a mess than everybody else? All sorts of things that make me feel like maybe the bottom line is I don't think people really care, like, just eat your food. Okay, it's really not a problem. But I get worried, okay, about those things. So all of us as human beings, and I feel I'm a competent person. I feel like I've achieved a lot, and yet there's so little I know sometimes about things. So when I look at my zone of proximal development based on any given skill, it goes up and down. Maybe I need some scaffolded support. Even when I was offered food yesterday, I said, do I take this? Is this about right? Even so, I'm asking those questions, right? So you're scaffolding. Yes, take a little of that. Yes, sure, have this. This is what this is called. You don't have to explain that to everybody else. Everybody else knows. But you explained it to me, okay? So you all are also my teachers. And that is very Vygotskyan, by the way. But furthermore, it also leads us nicely into our thinking that tomorrow we're going to cover a lot of, which is about, and we're going to starting to talk about it today, about thinking about inclusivity. And when we talk about those challenges, if I'm talking about people with disability, if I'm talking about gender, race, class, caste, skin, any kind of difference or anything that would, English language learners back home, right, where we have a lot of multilingual learners, where I have that diversity in a classroom, I can either go, boop, 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 oh, no, what am I going to do? Wait, I've got a kid who, I've got a kid on the autism spectrum. I don't even think they should be in my class. Oh, no way, I've got this one. They are trouble with a capital T, right? And I can start to do that if I set my barcode to look at their deficits. But I can also set my barcode to look at their strengths. And those same people that have those deficits are the exact same people who have the strengths, because all of us do, okay? So now I'm going to try to build something that I hope I can do okay on a slide here. Let's see how I do with this. Bear with me, please bear with me. We're going to we're going to add a slide. Okay, and now, here's the way I want to think about this. I could have built this ahead of time, but I think this is fine. I'm going to capital lock, and I'm going to build slightly bigger. Okay, so what I have in front of me here is a classroom of 25 students. Okay, everybody with me on this? Now, they're all lined up in rows, and there's exactly 25 of them. And, I mean, my classroom isn't likely to necessarily be lined up this way, but let's pretend that every one of those X's represents a student. And again, remember, this applies to any age, any grade, any level, anything, all the way up through to you all, anyone, little, it doesn't matter. When I look at a classroom, and let's just take a typical of 25, and you may say that's not a realistic number in India, it's going to be 50. Okay, fine, I don't care, double it. But let's just say I've got these 25 students. Now, and remember that we don't in real life have that barcode machine. I mean, even metaphorically, I guess we do in a way, we can get to know them. But when people are just coming into the room, I can't guess that you're a dancer. I can't guess that, that you get a little nervous with some, mingling with other people or social interactions. I can't necessarily guess that, you might be, what was your challenge?
Challenge?
Yeah, well, did you have a challenge that you shared?
That I did.
Oh, you didn't share it? Okay, sorry. But you can be
Helping nature.
yeah, helping. I don't know that I have somebody who's a helping nature, but actually that could work at a disadvantage too, right? That could be a challenge because you might be too helping at times, right? So actually, the truth of the matter is that many of our gifts can also be our challenges, and many of our challenges can also be our greatest gifts. And I don't always wish a challenge on, I don't ever wish a challenge on anybody. I think sometimes we've lived through challenges and we say, somebody says, well, that's made you this and it's made you that. Well, sure, but I don't wish it on somebody, right? But the fact that it's been part of our river means that we accommodate it into our systems and it makes us who we are. I am the teacher I am because of my experiences, right? So we've talked about that before. I'm the teacher I am because my children have taught me, okay? I didn't know anything about autism until I had a child on the autism spectrum. And the interesting thing is that I was really nervous about autism. Years ago, I thought, oh, that would be so hard. Are you kidding me? The gift of that child in my life growing up is beyond understanding. It's a book unto itself. So I have learned. So every one of my experiences, I don't wish autism on my child, but I will tell you that it makes him who he is in a way that is spectacular. And I wouldn't want him to not be who he is. So that's my point, is that every person coming into the room, and by the way, I do share personal examples, and I hope you don't mind. The reason I do that is I believe that I am an integrated whole, and I also believe that all of these experiences in my river helps to formulate. So I do that very consciously. I do it very deliberately. And I do it because I believe that especially as a strong woman in life, I am all of these things. We are all of our identities, right? And so we bring them with us. So anyway, having said that, now I'll go back to our classroom. We have this classroom full of people. Now let's suppose that there is this group up here that really is pretty together. They have really nothing that, nothing really gets in the way. Whoops, that's on capital locks. Of their learning and their growth in the classroom. Now, again, that could be very rare, but let's suppose somebody comes in and they just all together. Let's say one of you is just like, I am so together. I'm rested. I'm fed. I was on time. I feel so ready to learn. I have my materials. I'm just so good. And you have like this great day. And we all have been in classrooms. We're like, if everybody could be that kid, how great would this classroom be? That's the kids that they're just fine. They're just going fine. Now, what that means is that the rest of our group, let's see if I can find the shape I need. That means, yeah, here we go. That double bracket. I don't want a double bracket. That means that this group here, all of this group then basically has this group basically has something that interferes with learning. And I'm actually going to move this up slightly so that you can see, let's see. No, that didn't do it. That didn't do it. No, that didn't do it. All right. All right, we'll leave it right where it is. All of these students have something, and it might be something small. It might be something that's not super major, but it's something that interferes with their life. Remember, we only have a few of them that are like just perfectly ready to go. And that's pretty rare. And to be honest, it's pretty unusual to have even one or two, but let's just pretend. Everybody else has something. Maybe you lost your keys. Maybe yesterday I overslept from an alarm. Maybe you didn't eat what you should have eaten this morning. Maybe you didn't get enough sleep last night. Maybe you're worried about something. Maybe you woke up snuffly and you're a little bit feeling under the weather. Maybe you got into an argument with somebody and you just are really bummed out. It's kind of sitting in your head and your heart. Maybe you've got something coming up that's making you anxious. Maybe you have an appointment you're worried about. We're human. And so I bet almost all of us can think of something that could potentially get in the way of our learning, that might make us distracted, that might make us really feeling like we're not really ready to learn. Okay? But again, most of us kind of can deal with that all right. All right? Now we're just going to say that now we've got the next group. How do I do a copy from this? What do I do for, oh, I don't want numbers locked. Do I hit the Alt? How do I do a copy? C? Yeah, but Control. Control C, and then Control, there we go. Okay, so we're gonna save these, thank you. Okay, so now we have the next group, and the next group is here. And now we have we're going to have a situation on our hands where we now have something interfering chronically or long term. Okay, so that might be, for example, a health thing. If you break your leg, that's going to be something for a while. There might be, for children in classrooms, very often there's a new baby in the household. Again, that's a joyful thing in a lot of ways, but for a child, it can be very disruptive and it's not going to get over tomorrow, right? If I lost my keys or I'm worried about an appointment or I have a test coming up or I didn't sleep well last night, it's kind of a one-off thing. That kind of happens sometimes. But I'm talking about things now that are going to kind of linger with us. And they're just things that kind of are with us for a while. They are things that, you know, again, there's a new baby in the home, or our family dynamics have changed, or there's a divorce pending, or there's something that is an illness that's kind of lingering on, or COVID happens, right? Or so there are things that just feel like a struggle that's going to be more than just a day or two. So now when my students come in and I have a group of students that actually have something that's going to be a little bit more long-term that I need to be aware of. Somebody with a new baby in the home is not going to get a lot of sleep, but also may feel displaced, right, as a child in that home. Or somebody who just moved to the area. Maybe they just relocated and that's a whole new thing, right? So somebody has things that are kind of chronically bothering them, okay? And now we have people who have very distinctive marked differences . And we will insert a text box here, I think is the best way to do that. Okay, now I have a handful of kids that have a difference that actually makes a difference in their lives, not just long term, but actually, let's just move that down slightly here. But actually something that is a difference that's actually kind of foundational to their identity. So not like a broken leg or that's external to them, not necessarily like a new baby that's kind of external to them, but something that's a part of their identity, that is permanent, that is there, okay? And again, it could be It could be a chronic illness that you just always live with, always, that you don't ever get over because it's part of your life. It could be something like a birthmark that's very visible on your face. The port wine marks is what we call them in English, where we've got like the marks that are big that makes us very conscious of that. It could be something like missing a limb or missing some part of our system somewhere. It could be something like being diabetic. It doesn't have to be a health thing. It could be something like the way I look, right? It could be body build. It could be race. It could be gender. It could be something that really places me differently based on identity. It could be that I don't settle well with the gender that I was assigned at birth. It might be that I am feeling that I am in a society that's going to judge me based on, I don't know, in the Indian context, caste, something like that. So there's something that's an intrinsic part of my being. Okay, so we have a handful of those in the classroom. And then the last category is a category that says, let me just pull that up a little bit there. And this last category, whoopsie, is the one that says that I have a difference or a distinction. Oh, I didn't, no, don't do that. Let's go to something different that is protected by laws. Now, again, for example, largely these would be our anti-discrimination laws. Now, so this last category in the US would certainly be something like disability. I told you we have a pretty strong law. It is not a perfect law, but our special ed laws guarantee certain rights and certain anti-discrimination. Discrimination laws based on race or gender. We know that those exist in many countries, and that's kind of protected by law. So I'm not allowed to say, you can't do this because you're XYZ, right? That's sort of discriminatory in a way that gets protected. But remember that some of these differences here are not necessarily protected by law, right? Having a birthmark that makes you feel different, I mean, you're not supposed to be picked on for it. I guess there are anti-bullying laws, but really there are a lot of things that can make us different and unique in our individual selves that are not protected by law per se. The reason I'm sharing, and this is where I want you to just take for a second and think about this. I also want you to know my percentages are really kind of wacky in a way, right? This is just, again, a symbol. So I'm not saying that 5 out of every 25 students has this and 10 out of every, just pretend, just bear with me. We're talking about some general categories. And if we go back to our barcoding, what this means is this. My barcode app is so good that it can give me any one of these categories at any given time. So I not only can get the barcoding from what we just did, but now, now I can set it to be just that last category, which is what's protected by laws. And now, now I get to know who has what we call IEP plans or 504 plans, which are both protection plans that are individual plans to help support learners. In the United States, the IEP is the individual plan for kids with disabilities. And a 504 is actually based in Section 504 laws, which means simply it's anti-discrimination, which is based in having a disability that impacts you but doesn't require unique curriculum or unique educational materials. So for example, having extended time on tests, that would be a 504 accommodation. Or being able to sit near the door and get up 4 times, that's a 504 accommodation. Or being able to leave school a little early, that's a 504 accommodation. Or having somebody who can take notes for you, that's a 504 accommodation. None of those impact the actual curriculum that I'm giving you. So that would be an IEP plan if I needed to do that. You don't need to know those differences. That's part of what I teach. The bigger thing to remember is that both of those are legally protected laws, okay? That If you have that plan. So now I actually do get that information in the United States. And I don't know whether people do here in India or not, but I know which kids are on a plan. I have to know that as a teacher. It's a requirement for me to know it as a teacher because otherwise I could break the law. And I don't want to break the law and I don't need to if I just know who's on what plan. But that creates another issue, which means that the only thing my barcode gets set for is this group. I don't get set for any of these others. This is actually a real thing I do know. I come into a classroom, I know it at the college level. I get notices at the beginning of each semester for my Bates students. They no longer get IEPs. They're no longer, because they're in the college system, but they do still get 504 accommodation, which is accommodation for things like extended times on testing. It's things like preferential. They may be extra time on assignments. And I do have a list of those students, and I also must follow the laws for those students, okay? So sometimes it's health. Maybe somebody has a health, diabetes, let's say, and needs to be able to access medicines or food in a way that they need to be able to do. I can't legally tell that student not to. So I get that information. I'm entitled to that information, but that is the only information I get. Think about who's in my classroom and the fact that the only information I get are the students that are actually protected by law. That means that a great proportion, and again, don't play, my statistics are crazy, but that means that a lot of my class is just coming in with the good faith that I'm going to see them for their strengths, their challenges, their differences, and that my barcode machine is going to be set to complexly understand all of them. But that's not what we get. We get the ones that either have something protected by law. Sometimes we know if there's something chronic. Somebody might say to us, oh yeah, there's a new baby in their house, or oh yeah, they're dealing with such and such a health issue right now. Or so sometimes we get that information. And sometimes we don't, and so we don't know. But if every single one of us could be any one of these people, then I think we need to understand that as teachers, our responsibility is to get to understand and know this so that we are not judging or excluding anybody on the basis of something we just didn't understand. And very often, when we have an attitude or a bias or a perception of somebody, it's often because we do not understand. Okay? And having done this exercise with you, you can now understand that any one of us could be in any of these categories at any time. At any time, okay? So when I look at my barcode and I go, oh, I've got 3 kids with plans and another 2 with chronic conditions and another one with ADHD, oh, this is gonna be really hard. I can't even believe it. This is what drives me right out of teaching. Then what I'm doing is I'm coming in with my own biases, my own ideas, my own perception that, oh, I'm never in that category. That doesn't mean me, right? It's not me that's in that category, it's somebody else. Instead of saying, I am in those categories because I'm human. So in a perfect world, we wouldn't even need anti-discrimination laws. We would just know to set our machines to be aware that we're all human. Does this all make sense? So when we set this up and think about who's in front of us in a classroom or who we're working with, we're going to move into thinking tomorrow in particular about ways that we can differentiate, ways that we can be responsive. And we have to start with that philosophy of saying that every one of our students at any time could really be in almost any of these categories. We have people that are feeling different for some reason or another. And maybe it's just that they didn't get breakfast that day. But maybe it's that they don't feel that they belong in a world that the curriculum doesn't show them, or that they don't belong in a world that sees them as capable. Okay, there are 110 things, so we just have to remember this. And what really helps us is to remember that we also can be in any of these categories at any given time. Okay? We say we're not disabled, but I would say yet. Because one thing that happens as you age is you start to become more and more like eyes start to go and hearing starts to go, and you could end up with back troubles. And there are a lot of things that start to happen. And so oftentimes I say yet, right? You may not feel that you're disabled yet. I pray that you live a long, good life where you do start to understand that, yeah, maybe there are things that go a little quirky in our bodies, right? So if it's a 10-year-old that has something quirky with their bodies, that just means that they're there and you're not yet, right? Okay. So I'm going to pause for a minute. I want us to think for a moment. I want you to turn and talk. We don't need to do a think, pair, share. We'll do a turn and talk. You can talk in small groups of 2 or 3, something like that, or 4 if you need to. Remember, everybody, find a partner and just talk about all of this that you've heard. We've done a lot of things, and we will have a Kahoot coming up in our next time. And I'm also going to talk with you a little bit about AI today. A little later on in our tutorial session, we're going to play around a little bit with AI. So we're going to do some more interactive stuff. So right now, and then I do have another activity. I still have a little bit of time. Okay. So I have an activity to back us up to review some material. But for right now, turn and talk about what are you thinking? What are you learning anything? Is something being reinforced for you? Do you have a question or a critique of it? Where are your thoughts taking you? Just turn and talk. I'm going to get out. I feel like I'm. Okay, let's do a couple of share outs, and then we're going to kind of wrap up that session, and we'll move to have a small break and do some acting activities. But let's do some sharing. So we did our turn and talk. What do people have for thoughts? And really anything. It could be a question. It could be an affirmation of what you already know. It could be something you learned. It could be anything. Somebody want to share some of what you talked about? Yeah.
We were trying to analyze the fourth point, that what would be the laws that are protecting somebody from learning in India. So we just came across one case where the student was unable to pay the fees.
Yes.
So under that, so that could be one example.
Yes. So somebody who's unable to pay the fees, that's a really interesting example, because you would put it, which one would you put it under? This one? Even lower? The last one. That is, okay, yes, exactly, right? Because no one should be kept from an education due to an inability to pay. And that's where we get, again, when we talk about purposes of education, aims of education, we talk about, does the government provide free education? And that takes us all the way back to our theorists in the US. We had Horace Mann, remember, who was talking about everyone should have a right to an education. It's the foundation of democracy. So we can't expect people to have to pay. Now, there are sometimes hidden costs to education all over the place. There may be costs for uniforms. There may be costs for transportation. There may be costs that are about, sometimes we have lab fees for certain classes that you take, right? And even in the US, to get into an upper level math class, you have to have a very expensive calculator in the United States. And so schools are required to have a bank of those calculators that students can sign out or use in the classroom, but they need to have access. You can't ever expect that somebody needs to pay money to access their education. That's a nice example of protected by law. Interestingly, I was wondering if it would also fit up where there may be a long-term chronic situation, right, where food or access to something that you need may be economically based. Because one thing we know is that low income, lower resourced kids have a harder time getting to school. They have a harder time maintaining in school. They have a harder time keeping their motivation up in school. It's not because they are less intelligent or less capable or less deserving. It is simply a matter of economics that sometimes impact other things. Health issues for where they may be living, okay? Exposure to elements that are not safe or not clean, okay? Even clean water is something we can't take for granted, okay? All right, so that's a great example of thinking about where somebody might fit in here. What else did people think about? Other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead. You think homework should be different for everybody. Now, there is a whole entire body of research around homework, and I am glad you mentioned it. Homework. How many of you grew up in systems that expected you to do homework? Raise your hand. Okay. Was there anybody who grew up in a system that did not expect you to do homework? So homework is deeply problematic. In order to do homework, what do you need to have? You need to have, I'm sorry, I'm hearing the fans. An understanding of the topics. You have to be able to do some work independently. What else do you need to have? A stable environment, probably a quiet space. Concentration, so you need to be able to have it quiet. You might need access to resources depending on what that homework is. Somebody who, if you think of Vygotsky, somebody who can help mediate that learning at home. Really, that's so Vygotskyan right there. And we don't all have that. You might need access to even a table to sit at. Resources, right? Now, it's true you could do your homework on the floor or on a cot or on somewhere else, but it's not conducive to the best kind of learning, right? We might need proper lighting. We might need AC to be able to do our homework. What we know about homework is that homework is highly affiliated with your resources at the home front. Motivation can also. Also, what jobs do you have at home? Are you going home and needing to help take care of younger siblings? Are you going home and needing to cook for the family? Are you going home and needing to do some other jobs? Okay, in the US, a lot of our low-income students are going from school and working. Not little kids. I mean, there are laws against that, but high school kids have jobs. Okay, so when are they doing that? So homework is, I'm very glad you talked about that, because really that's something I'd put in this category, right? Now, I'm not arguing, again, be careful about backing ourselves into corners. I'm not saying, do we say we don't ever give homework? Well, let's think about that for a minute. Are there ways that we could provide supports within schools for homework? So one of the things that I've done with students before is to provide my lunchtime, they can come in and work with me on homework, or after school or before school. Well, I'm not going to get this done at home. Fine, I'll see you at 7:30 tomorrow morning. Let's just have and usually when I have students stay, you know me, I'm likely to do something like a piece of candy for them or something that doesn't feel like they're being punished for it, but that they're being supported. Another thing some schools do back home is do what we call an intervention period, which is it's like a study hall, but it's very specifically geared towards getting your homework done. And so we provide that support. We might send a note home to say these are the things that are expected, but we might not grade those pieces. Like we don't necessarily have to mark them as you didn't do, you didn't do, you didn't do, you didn't do. Maybe we just say you can do this as extra practice. There are a lot of ways that we don't need to necessarily say no homework. we might say, I taught literature, I taught English literature for a long time, and I would assign, let's say, 20 pages of reading. Now, what I usually would do is say to students, I will, first of all, get you started on that reading in class so that it's a little easier, you can get your voice in your head. The second thing I'll do is I'll be here at lunchtime and we can read aloud or together quietly or whatever we want. And the third thing is that after school, I will also be here if you want to just come and read. So that way we could get them set up. I also made sure that if I did a reading quiz or accountability for that, that they had material and information in front of them to help them get through that. Now, I'm not talking about enabling, I'm talking about supporting. We're talking about that scaffolding. We're talking about the ZPD. If we throw people off the deep end, no learning happens. If they sit around in comfort zone, no learning happens, right? So I'm very glad you talked about homework because it's not something that we had on our agenda here, and I don't ever want to forget that is part of schooling and how it happens. Again, think philosophically. We all grew up believing in homework. I mean, I sure did. When I became a teacher, I'm like, you're doing this much homework every night. And I absolutely believed it. I believed it so tightly in that hand, there was nothing that was going to keep me from letting that go. Until what? What do you think changed my mind on that? Well, I mean, just name anything that would have changed my opinions on that. Another professor, a colleague who says, wait a minute, what are you doing? What else might have changed my mind on that? My own experience is both as a learner who knew what it took to have homework time when I was also kind of under-resourced and trying to find a quiet space, right? That made me think. My own experiences as a parent certainly made me think. All of a sudden, I've got kids that are freaking out over homework, and I'm going, what is the matter with kids these days, right? And my own kids and I'm fighting with my kids over homework, and then I'm thinking, I don't want my relationship with my children to be fighting over homework. That's a school, and my son on the autism spectrum said to me very wisely one day, he was about 10 years old and he wasn't doing any of his homework. And he said to me one day, homework, this work is schoolwork. Home is home. Home is my one safe place to be. And I won't do schoolwork at home. He was adamant. He was about 10 years old, adamant. He said, home is where I feel safe. And if I pull that work out, all I'm doing is bringing school into my home. And he wasn't wrong. And it changed everything I started believing and had always believed. What else might have changed my opinions? Did you? Observing kids. And who are the ones that notoriously every single time don't have their homework done? It's always, always, always the same two. I'm just picking on, you know this, right? Okay, you're my examples. I don't really think you're not. Okay, I just always want to, I do this all the time in my classes, and I'm thinking, please don't take offense. These two never get their homework done. Every single solitary day, they don't get their homework done. So now they're going to be graded lower. And instead of me saying, what's going on with these two, that maybe I could make it a little bit better and easier for them, now they're being punished because they're not getting their homework done. And it's never distributed evenly. It's always these two, right? I mean, every once in a while, it's somebody else. It's almost always these two, right? Yeah, so all of those things really made me rethink. Thank you for the question. That is a really great question. And I want you all to think about, what do we hold so tightly? And then we have to go, whoa, maybe not. Okay, maybe not. Yeah.
So, ma'am, don't you think that we need to change the definition of homework that is being given, So
maybe we need to change the definition.
Homework mean to say that something is given just to have a recall, a revision. What you
Right.
Learn, right?
Right.
It's given in the class also by giving the assistance to the one those who are not able
Right.
to do it at home.
Right. So there are a lot of different, there's so much written about homework. And I agree with you. Maybe change the purpose, maybe change the definition, maybe change the way we expect it to be done, or where and how we expect it to be done. Maybe if we need extra resources, like if we're building posters, maybe we provide that in the school. And I'm going to tell you too, how many of you know, and you can keep this secret if you want to, but how many of you secretly, you don't have to raise your hands, know that some of that homework gets done by the parents anyway? Sometimes. Okay, just keep it secret to yourself, all right? How many of you think that maybe there are times that a parent gets a little bit overly involved in the homework? How many of you think maybe involved in projects, those science projects? Oh,
Ma'am, I would like to add this statement. We are not sometimes many at times.
yeah. I saw it happen.
For the pre-primary case, I have
Yeah.
seen parents are struggling a lot to
To finish it. Yeah, I've had that happen. I've seen it many times.
We have changed this, and we have a zero period.
A zero, there you go, a zero period.
Students are asked to complete their homework in the school itself before they leave.
That's fantastic.
So the two things happen.
Two
The
things.
Teacher gives the homework, students do it.
Yes.
The purpose is done.
Yes.
And they don't carry the homework at home.
There you go. So there are ways to do it. There, thank you. Perfect. That's very nice. It's not that we have to say that homework's gone in our lives. It's that we figure out a way. Maybe we don't call it homework. Maybe we call it the work that has to be done by the next time you get to class. 0 period. Time to do it in class. Well, you know, maybe we say the last half hour, we'll just take time to get our homework done. Exactly right. There are ways to do it. So we don't have to throw it away and we don't have to hold it so tightly. And I really appreciate that. Thank you. I wish all schools could do it like that. That's a bravo.
Seriously, schools, the central board state secondary schools, they have adopted this
Good.
habit to the practice
It's
of
fantastic.
0 period.
That's
So
really
it's in the
fantastic.
day or in the last.
That's really nice. And again, back home, we tend to think of it as what we call an intervention period, but I like 0 period. That works great. There go my cards. Other thoughts that people want to mention quickly, and then we'll wrap up our, yes.
Disappearing from a long term. Example I have that my daughter's school, she has a friend, and daily she used to come to school with her mother, dropping her mother.
Yes.
So the after 2 days, she finds that the mother is not coming to school. To
Yes,
drop her.
right.
Someone else is coming. So she inquired about to the child what happened,
Yes.
and she came to know that mother died suddenly.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
And
So
once
2
you
days-
learn that, all of a sudden it changes
Yeah,
everything.
2 days the child did not come, but the third day when the child came, she was not the same what she was.
No,
So
no,
this
absolutely
is a
not.
long-term,
Yeah.
what do you say?
Long term. That is long term for sure. So a death in the family is so traumatic, but we often just assume that after a week or whatever, people are just getting right back to it, right? We need to get ourselves inside the body and mind and soul of a child who may be facing a loss, or even ourselves. We are different people, right? It may even go all the way down to a difference that's based in your identity, because now you've lost a parent. That does never change, right? So those are the kinds of, that's a very nice example as well. But if we don't know, so the more we know about our students, the more we can think about where we fit them into this chart, and the more we can lean in, right, and be compassionate. Okay, I am going to close us out there. Is that all right? And then we have some interactive. So in terms of the recording, we are done for the day. Turn this off.